Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
3 years ago, I started as an intern at this mid-sized marketing firm right out of college and worked my way up to a junior account manager position. The office culture was pretty typical, some great coworkers, a few office politics here and there, and then there was Karen. Karen had been my direct supervisor for the past year and a half. She was one of those people who seemed to think that being a manager meant you could treat everyone beneath you like disposable resources. She'd regularly schedule last-minute meetings that ran way over time, expected us to work weekends without extra pay, and had this weird obsession with micromanaging everything we did. But I needed this job, especially since I was still paying off student loans, so I kept my head down and dealt with it. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I'd gotten to the office early to prep for a big client presentation we had scheduled for later that afternoon. This was a huge account, a local restaurant chain looking to rebrand completely. I've been working on this project for weeks, staying late most nights to get the pitch deck perfect. I was at my desk around 10 in the morning, sipping my second cup of coffee and reviewing the presentation slides one more time. That's when my stomach started acting up. At first, it was just a mild discomfort, nothing too unusual. I figured maybe I'd eaten something weird for breakfast or had too much caffeine. But within about 20 minutes, the pain got significantly worse. My stomach started rumbling and grumbling in ways I'd never experienced before. The pain was sharp and kept getting more intense. I started sweating even though the office air conditioning was cranked up like usual. My face felt hot and I could tell I probably looked terrible. This wasn't just some regular stomach upset, something was seriously wrong. I tried to tough it out for another 15 minutes, thinking maybe it would pass, but the pain kept getting worse and I was starting to feel dizzy. I knew I needed help, but I also knew that Karen was in her office taking what seemed like her third conference call of the day. She hated being interrupted during calls, but I was getting scared. I gathered up whatever courage I could muster and walked slowly toward her office. Each step felt like a challenge, and I had to stop twice to catch my breath. Through her glass door, I could see her gesturing wildly while talking to someone on speakerphone. I knocked gently and waited. She looked up at me with that annoyed expression she always had when someone dared to disturb her. She held up one finger telling me to wait and continued her call for another 3 minutes while I stood there feeling like I might collapse. Finally, she muted her call and looked at me expectantly. I told her I was really not feeling well and asked if I could leave early or maybe call for an ambulance. She stared at me like I'd just asked her to donate a kidney. She told me I couldn't be serious, that we had the big presentation later and I wanted to leave early. She said I should just suck it up and get back to work. The pain in my stomach got even worse at that moment, and I actually had to grab onto her door frame to steady myself. I told her again that I really wasn't exaggerating and that I thought I might need immediate medical attention. She rolled her eyes and let out this dramatic sigh. She said I was always making a big deal out of nothing, but fine. If it would get me to stop bothering her, I could call an ambulance or whatever. But I better not be faking it. I was in too much pain to argue. I made my way back to my desk and called emergency services. The operator was really helpful and asked me to describe my symptoms. When I mentioned the severe abdominal pain and sweating, she told me an ambulance was on the way and to try to stay calm. But then Karen's voice cut through the entire office. She said seriously, an ambulance, and asked if I was planning to bill it to the company. She reminded everyone that they had budgets to consider. Every single person in the office stopped what they were doing and stared. My co-workers looked mortified. Some of them came over to ask if I was okay or if I needed anything while we waited. But Karen just stood there with her arms crossed, looking completely irritated that this was disrupting her day. When the paramedics arrived, they took my vital signs and asked about my symptoms. They seemed concerned and said I definitely needed to get to the hospital right away. When they loaded me onto the stretcher, I caught a glimpse of Karen standing by the front door, shaking her head like this was all some elaborate inconvenience I'd planned just to ruin her presentation. At the hospital, things moved pretty quickly. The doctors ran several tests and did some scans. Within a couple hours, they diagnosed me with acute appendicitis. The doctor explained that my appendix was inflamed and could rupture at any time, which could be life-threatening. They needed to operate immediately. I called my family to let them know what was happening, and they rushed to the hospital. My mom was crying, and my dad kept asking if I'd been in pain for a while. I explained what had happened at work, and they were furious that my boss had been so dismissive. The surgery went well, and I woke up a few hours later feeling groggy but relieved. My family was there, along with a couple of close friends who'd driven over when they heard. The doctor said I'd need to stay in the hospital for at least 2 days and then take about a week off work to recover. That's when the nurse brought me my phone. I had several missed calls and text messages from co-workers checking on me, which was really sweet. But I also had a voicemail from Karen that I almost couldn't believe. I put the phone on speaker so my family could hear. Karen's message said she'd heard I had my appendix removed and called it a pretty dramatic way to get out of the presentation. She said that since I'd have some downtime, I could work on the presentation slides because they needed them by tomorrow morning. My sister's jaw dropped and asked if I was okay. I told her yeah, it was just Karen being Karen. But honestly, I wasn't okay. I was lying in a hospital bed, recovering from emergency surgery that could have saved my life, and my boss was asking me to work on a presentation, not asking how I was feeling, not apologizing for dismissing my medical emergency, just demanding more work. That night, after my family left and I was alone with my thoughts, I decided I'd had enough. I wasn't going to let Karen treat me or anyone else like this anymore. So I started drafting an email to the company's chief executive officer. I'd never spoken to him directly, but I'd seen him around the office and heard good things about him from other employees. He seemed like the kind of person who would actually care about what was happening in his company. I kept the email professional but didn't leave out any details. I explained exactly what had happened, from Karen's initial dismissal of my medical emergency to her request that I work while recovering from surgery. I attached screenshots of her text messages and included the voicemail recording. The subject line was simple: concerns about managerial behavior. I sent it around midnight and tried to get some sleep. 2 days later, I was back home recovering when I got a call from the chief executive officer's assistant. She asked if I could come in for a meeting the following Monday. I was still pretty sore and tired, but I agreed. Walking into the chief executive officer's office was intimidating. It was this huge corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, but he was really welcoming and thanked me for reaching out. He told me he'd read my email and reviewed all the attached messages. He said he was quite disappointed in the behavior I described. That's when I noticed Karen was already sitting in one of the chairs across from his desk. She looked like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. The chief executive officer turned to Karen and asked her to explain herself. She stammered that she didn't mean for it to come across that way. She said she was just under a lot of pressure with the presentation and didn't want the team to be disrupted. He told her that pressure didn't excuse treating colleagues poorly. He said the way she handled the situation was unacceptable and that her behavior reflected poorly on the company. He added that he was disappointed in her lack of empathy. Karen tried to argue that she was just focused on meeting client deadlines, but everything she said made her sound worse. She kept digging herself deeper, talking about how I should have been more clear about how serious my situation was, even though asking to call an ambulance wasn't clear enough. The chief executive officer said he'd made his decision. He told Karen that effective immediately, she would be relieved of her managerial position. She would be moved to a different department, and her new role would not involve any supervisory responsibilities. Karen started stammering about how this wasn't fair, but the chief executive officer cut her off. He told her the meeting was over and that human resources would be in touch about her transition. After Karen left, looking absolutely defeated, the chief executive officer turned back to me. He said he wanted me to know that this kind of behavior had no place in their company. He told me I should always feel comfortable speaking up if I encountered any further issues in the workplace. I thanked him and walked out feeling like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. A few weeks later, I found out that Karen's new position was in the filing department, basically doing data entry all day with no authority over anyone. Meanwhile, I got promoted to senior account manager and received a nice raise. My husband runs a small landscaping business, so summers are his busy season, but he always makes time for family outings. We have a 6-year-old daughter who loves swimming, so we decided to take her to the community pool on what looked like a perfect sunny day. We've been going to this pool since our daughter was tiny. It's nothing fancy, just a basic community center with a large pool, some picnic tables, and a small snack bar. The place gets pretty crowded on weekends, but weekday afternoons are usually calm with just families and their kids. We arrived around 12 p.m. and found a good spot near the shallow end. I spread out our towels while my husband helped our daughter with her floaties. She was practically bouncing with excitement, already begging to get in the water. I told her to wait for her daddy to finish with her arm floaties first, but she kept insisting she wanted to swim right away. My husband finished helping her and told her she was all set to go have fun. She jumped in immediately and started playing with some pool toys we brought. That's when I noticed another family sitting up nearby, a woman about my age with a little girl who looked to be around 7 or 8. The mom seemed nice enough, and her daughter was looking at our daughter's pool toys with interest. The other mom commented on what a beautiful day it was for swimming, and I agreed. She mentioned that her daughter had been talking about coming to the pool all week and was glad they finally made it. The two girls hit it off right away. They started playing together, sharing toys and making up games in the shallow end. It was one of those moments that make you feel good about kids and how naturally they connect with each other. After about an hour, the other mom got up and gathered her purse. She told her daughter that she needed to grab some snacks from the cafeteria and asked if she could come along. The little girl said she didn't want to stop playing and asked if she could stay. Her mom wasn't sure since she couldn't watch her from inside the building. I offered to keep an eye on her since we weren't going anywhere. The other mom was grateful and said she'd only be a few minutes. The little girl beamed and ran to get her water gun from their bag. She started playing outside the pool area, squirting water at trees and making little water puddles. Our daughter joined her, and they were having a blast making patterns with the water. That's when Karen showed up. I've heard people use that name to describe a certain type of person, but I never thought I'd actually meet one. This woman walked onto the pool deck like she owned the place. Her son, who looked to be about 9, trailed behind her, carrying multiple pool toys and looking generally unhappy. Karen immediately zeroed in on the little girl with the water gun. She walked over with that walk you see in movies right before someone demands to speak to the manager. Karen told the little girl that her son wanted to use the water gun. The girl looked confused and looked around, probably wondering where her mom was. She explained that the water gun was hers and her mom had bought it for her. Karen insisted that her son had seen it first and had been wanting one just like that. She demanded that the girl share it with him. The little girl said it was hers and she had been playing with it first. I was watching this unfold from my chair, still not entirely sure if I should get involved. Maybe Karen was a family friend or relative. Maybe this was just a misunderstanding between kids that would work itself out. Karen's voice got louder and sharper. She told the girl that when an adult tells you to share, you share, and ordered her to hand over the water gun right away. The little girl clutched her water gun tighter and shook her head. That's when Karen did something that made my blood boil. She grabbed the water gun right out of the girl's hands, and in the process, her fingernails scratched the child's arm hard enough to leave marks. The little girl started crying immediately, both from pain and confusion. But instead of backing down, she found her courage and demanded her water gun back, telling Karen that she had hurt her. I was about to get up when Karen did the unthinkable. She put both hands on that little girl's shoulders and shoved her straight into the pool. The splash was loud, and suddenly everyone around the pool was staring. My husband jumped up from his chair and started walking toward Karen, while I ran to find the girl's mom. I found her at the snack bar, just paying for some chips and juice boxes. I urgently told her that she needed to come quickly because some woman had just pushed her daughter into the pool. She dropped everything and ran toward the pool area. When we got there, Karen was still standing by the pool edge, holding the water gun like a trophy, while the little girl treaded water and cried. My husband was trying to help the girl get to the ladder. The girl's mom demanded to know what Karen had done to her daughter. Karen replied that the child needed to learn about sharing, and maybe next time she would listen when an adult talked to her. That's when things got really interesting. The girl's mom didn't hesitate for even a second. She grabbed that water gun right out of Karen's hands and smacked her over the head with it. Then before Karen could react, she planted her foot right in Karen's stomach and pushed. Karen went flying backward into the pool with the biggest splash I've ever seen. When she surfaced, sputtering and screaming, her perfect hair was plastered to her head. Karen yelled that the other mom was crazy and had assaulted her, threatening to call the police. The girl's mom told her to go ahead and call him, saying they could see what the police thought about someone pushing a child into a pool and scratching her. My husband had helped the little girl out of the pool by then, and she was clinging to her mom, still sniffling but clearly relieved. But Karen wasn't done. She climbed out of the pool looking like a drowned rat, water dripping everywhere. Instead of walking away like any reasonable person would, she started charging toward the girl's mom like she was going to tackle her. That's when Karma decided to make an appearance. The pool deck was wet from all the splashing and running around. Karen's feet hit a particularly slippery spot right at the pool's edge, and down she went. Hard. She hit the concrete with a sound that made everyone wince. For a moment, she just lay there groaning, and I actually started to feel bad for her. But then she tried to get up and started screaming about lawsuits and how she was going to sue everyone in sight. The lifeguard had already called the police when the pushing started. They arrived just as Karen was trying to stand up and immediately called for an ambulance when they saw she might be injured from her fall. The officer told Karen that she needed to stay still until the paramedics could check her out. Karen demanded that they arrest the other mom, calling her crazy and claiming she had been attacked. The officer said they would need to speak with witnesses and review any video footage first. Turns out the pool has security cameras everywhere. The police watched the footage right there on the spot. You could see everything clearly. Karen grabbing the water gun, scratching the child, and shoving her into the pool. When the paramedics arrived, they put Karen on a stretcher. She kept yelling about pressing charges right up until they loaded her into the ambulance. Her son had been sitting quietly at the table the whole time, and my heart went out to him. He looked embarrassed and scared. The police took statements from everyone who witnessed what happened. Multiple families had seen the whole thing, and their stories all matched. The girl's mom decided to press charges for child endangerment and assault. After all the excitement died down, the other mom came over to thank us. She said she couldn't believe we had jumped in to help and thanked us for getting her and watching out for her daughter. I told her I was sorry I didn't step in sooner and that I wasn't sure what was happening at first. My husband added that the woman was completely out of line and no one should treat a child that way. The little girl had calmed down by then, and the paramedics cleaned up her scratched arm. It wasn't serious, just surface scratches, but it was clear evidence of what Karen had done. The other mom mentioned that this was actually the first time they had come to this pool since they had just moved to town last month. I told her that nothing like this had ever happened there before, and it was usually very peaceful. We ended up spending the rest of the afternoon together. Our daughters played like the whole incident never happened, which amazed me. Kids are so resilient. A few days later, I ran into the girl's mom at the grocery store. She told me something that made the whole situation even more disturbing. She explained that Child Protective Services had gotten involved after the police report was filed. She said the officers had noticed some things about how Karen's son was acting that day. He had been very withdrawn and seemed scared of his own mother. They decided to do a welfare check. It turns out Karen had a history of aggressive behavior, and her son had been dealing with her anger issues for years. The incident at the pool was just the final straw that got authorities involved. I kept thinking about that little boy and hoping he would end up somewhere safer. No child should have to walk on eggshells around their own parent. The girl's mom also mentioned that Karen tried to sue everyone involved, including the pool, but her lawyer dropped the case when they saw the security footage. Hard to claim you're the victim when there's clear video of you assaulting a child. I'm 25 and have a pretty normal blended family situation. My mom remarried when I was 12, and my stepdad brought his son into our lives. My stepbrother is 4 years older than me, and we also have my younger stepsister who's 22. It took time, but we all genuinely became a real family. My stepdad didn't just automatically love me because he married my mom. We built that relationship over years of getting to know each other, sharing experiences, and learning to trust one another. 2 years ago, my stepbrother started dating this woman who grew up in foster care and never had a stable family. I genuinely felt for her situation. Nobody deserves to grow up without that foundation. We all tried to welcome her and include her, knowing she didn't have family of her own. But from day one, she seemed to expect an instant, intimate connection rather than wanting to build genuine relationships with us. She would ask deeply personal questions about my therapy sessions, my medication, even my sex life. When I'd tell her I wasn't comfortable discussing those things, she'd back off for that conversation but then ask the same invasive questions the next time we talked. My parents experienced similar boundary issues. She started calling them mom and dad almost immediately, even after they politely asked her not to. She'd stop during that conversation but then go right back to it next time. She tried to insert herself into every family photo, every family dispute, every social event we planned. My younger stepsister and I bore most of the burden of her neediness. We get constant texts wanting to hang out, wanting to talk, wanting to be included in everything. We tried setting gentle boundaries, but nothing stuck. The situation got worse after my stepbrother proposed 6 months ago. She tried to make me her maid of honor without asking, just announced it to people. She demanded my mother throw her a bridal shower. Most bizarre of all, she reached out to distant relatives we barely talked to, introducing herself and telling them about the engagement. We talked to my stepbrother about these issues multiple times. We even sat him down to explain how overwhelming her behavior had become. He kept promising he'd talk to her, but nothing ever changed. Last week, everything came to a head. We were all staying at our parents' house for the weekend, me and my boyfriend, my stepsister, and her partner, and my stepbrother with his fiancée. On Saturday morning, my stepbrother's fiancée and my boyfriend were still sleeping upstairs while the rest of us were in the kitchen having coffee. My stepsister, my mom, and I were casually discussing maybe taking a girls' weekend trip somewhere, just the three of us. We were talking about maybe going to a spa or visiting some wineries. Nothing concrete, just daydreaming out loud. His fiancée came downstairs and overheard our conversation. She immediately lit up and said the trip sounded like so much fun, then asked when we were all going. I looked at my mom and stepsister, both of whom looked uncomfortable. I explained that we were just talking about the three of us taking a trip together. She seemed confused and asked why she wouldn't be invited, saying it sounded perfect for bonding. I felt my patience finally snap after months of this behavior. I told her she couldn't just invite herself to things and pointed out that she had heard us talking and simply decided she was included. Her voice got higher and more emotional when she insisted she was part of this family now. I explained that being engaged to my stepbrother didn't give her a blanket invitation to every single thing his family does. She got upset and said she just wanted to be included in our family because this was the only family she knew, and she didn't have a proper family of her own. I knew I should have stopped there, but months of frustration came pouring out. I told her that I knew about her situation and we all sympathized with it, but that didn't mean we owed her a new family just because she wanted one. The entire kitchen went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. My mom's eyes went wide and my stepsister just stared at her coffee mug. His fiancée's face crumpled, and she got up without another word and went back upstairs. She didn't come out of the bedroom for the rest of the day. About an hour later, my stepbrother came downstairs looking furious. He demanded to know what I had said to her because she was upstairs crying and wouldn't tell him what happened. I told him I had simply said she couldn't invite herself on our trip. He said there was obviously more to it than that because she was devastated. My mom jumped in to defend me, telling him we'd talked to him about this so many times and that his fiancée had no boundaries, but he refused to address it with her. My stepbrother accused me of attacking her about not having a family and said that was low, even for me. I insisted I hadn't attacked her and had just said that wanting a family didn't mean we automatically owed her one. He asked if I had any idea what I'd done to her mentally, saying she'd been making so much progress, and I had just set her back completely. My dad stepped in and told his son that we'd given him dozens of opportunities to handle this situation, but instead of addressing his fiancée's behavior that made everyone uncomfortable, he was attacking me for finally speaking up. My stepbrother packed their bags that afternoon and left without saying goodbye to anyone except our parents. Since then, he's barely been in contact with any of us. When I have managed to talk to him on the phone, he keeps telling me I went way too low with what I said and that I've damaged his fiancée's mental health. He says she's been really depressed since that weekend and that it's my fault for being so cruel. I do feel bad about how I said it. I know having no stable family must have been incredibly painful for her, but I also think she's been overstepping boundaries for 2 years, and my stepbrother has refused to address the problem. We're all open to building relationships with her. We have great relationships with other partners who've joined our family, but those relationships were built gradually with mutual respect for boundaries. She seemed to think she could just decide she was entitled to instant intimacy with all of us. I never said she wasn't part of the family. What I meant was that you can't just parachute yourself into an existing family and expect everyone to immediately love you the way they'd love someone they've known their whole lives. Real family bonds take time to develop even in the best circumstances. My stepdad didn't love me instantly when he married my mom. He got to know me over time, learned who I was, and grew to love me for me. We wanted the chance to build that kind of genuine connection with her, but she kept trying to force something that needed to happen naturally. And now my stepbrother is barely speaking to any of us, and I'm worried I've permanently damaged our family relationships. But I also don't think I should have had to keep accepting behavior that made me uncomfortable just because she had a difficult childhood. I keep going back and forth on whether I should reach out with a more sincere apology, but part of me thinks that would just enable more boundary-crossing behavior. The situation feels impossible, and I hate that my stepbrother is caught in the middle, even though I think he should have handled this much sooner. I genuinely wanted to like her and include her in our family, but her approach made that nearly impossible, and now I'm not sure if there's any way to repair the damage that's been done. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.